Welcome to the PR in Lockdown podcast, your guide to PR and communications in a post-lockdown world, in collaboration with the PRCA. I'm Rob Double, founder and director of production and content consultancy Access Studios. In this episode, I'm talking to Nicola Koronka, co-founder of Missive, a strategic communications consultancy that specialises in technology. Looking after the team has been a key priority for Nicola during lockdown, and she shares her experience of managing her staff virtually throughout the pandemic, as well as talking through the company's priorities transitioning into this new normal. Nicola, thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Oh, no, thanks for having me.
So just give us a quick overview of what Missive is and what are you guys about?
We're a specialist consultancy for the technology industry, PR and content marketing services. We've experienced about 20% year-on-year growth since our inception in 2015. We're now a team of 16 and right across the technology spectrum. So we enjoy working with startups and sort of seed Series A's backed technology companies that are disrupting the industries that they operate in, right through to sort of large blue chip incumbent brands who maybe are experiencing that disruption and trying to transform their own organizations with tech.
So you just mentioned there that, quite good growth year on year, and then came lockdown, and then came coronavirus. Talk us through that initial period. What's the impact? What impact that's had on Missive and you guys as a team?
Yeah, so I guess I would actually split the initial period into two halves, because I think the first 2 to 4 weeks were incredibly challenging. I think for everybody, personally and professionally. And I think the biggest challenge was just the anxiety of the unknown and not really knowing what we were preparing for. So Missive we shut our office about a week before lockdown hit. We felt like that was the most appropriate thing to do to keep staff safe and continue our work. And where we've always had a really flexible working policy anyway. So we've always encouraged people to work from home and work wherever they want really, and work flexible hours as suits them. So structurally, whilst we weren't sure exactly how it's going to work to have everybody out of the office, actually kind of from an operational perspective, nothing really changed. Everybody settled into home working overnight. But that first period, I think, there was a lot of kind of drama. There was a lot of change in people's personal lives. I had 2 children at home all of a sudden, my husband working next to me in one office, and we were juggling childcare and worrying about, older relatives. And so I think people were quite distracted from business life with everything going on around them. And obviously, anybody that works in PR is a keen consumer of media. And I think it became quite addictive for everyone for a while to keep checking in with counts and numbers and government briefings and so forth. So that first few weeks, I think, was really challenging to stay focused and understand what we were actually dealing with.
I was just going to say, talk us through that process of deciding to close the office the week before the lockdown was actually initiated. So talk us through the thought process that you guys went through to get to that decision.
Yeah, so we're a really collaborative organisation. We sort of talk about Missive as being an evolving cooperative, and we listen to the voices of our team. 16 people, that's easier to do than perhaps larger consultancies, but we've sort of striven to do that as we've grown, and we've really held on to that kind of philosophy. And so we just asked everybody, we talked to people in a lot of detail about what they were comfortable with. And the government advice was evolving, and there was an encouragement to work from home, and we decided that given everybody was already equipped to do that technically, that it was the right thing to do. So we went ahead and just did that and protected the well-being of the team, really.
And how did you find, you mentioned really nicely there, you went through the challenges of having kids at home, sharing an office with a partner, or if you're in a flat share or anything like that. Everyone had challenges of being in a new environment. How did you manage that with your team? How did you get everyone through that initial period where there was that sudden change? Yeah,
it did feel quite sudden, didn't it? I think it sort of affirmed our priorities as an organisation around being centred on people. So we've always had loads of processes in place that mean we're very well connected as a team, and we just relied on those a lot more, and obviously introduced some new ones. So
when you say, is that sort of technology, softwares, you're using platforms which mean you're in communication with, everyone's in communication most of the day?
Yeah, that's right. And obviously normally in a physical environment as well. So we turned some of our physical meetings into Zoom meetings. We've kept a weekly stand up where we talk about priorities and focuses for the week amongst us, which, in some ways is a bit laborious. It's like a reporting meeting rather than a learning meeting. But on a Monday morning, it's really nice. The team really enjoy checking in on Zoom and being together in like a room. So we've kept that up. We quickly moved to implement a fortnightly business health check meeting. And so, I talked earlier about how kind of collaborative we are as a team. That extends to kind of transparency in the business as well. So we've always shared a huge amount of financial information, commercial performance information with the team. And we recognised really quickly that was going to be incredibly important to up the ante on. Quite rightly, we were sort of watching the world implode around us. And I think it's fair to say, from contacts that I have across the industry and people that I've spoken to, particularly the B2C part of our industry got hit really quickly. And there was a lot of uncertainty and anxiety from the industry, I think, around job protection. And we wanted to make sure that the team felt really well communicated with. So we've actually literally this week just changed this to a monthly meeting because things have calmed down. But throughout, from the beginning of lockdown, we've held a fortnightly meeting where we've opened up to the team about the kind of cost reduction measures that we've implemented and I guess steps that we've taken as an organisation to make sure that we're putting jobs first and protecting everybody. And I'm delighted to say that we haven't had to make anybody redundant, and we certainly don't foresee that being a problem for us. And so we kept those processes in place and introduced an anonymous feedback form that people could submit questions to me anonymously if they had any concerns and worries. We set up a work from home budget and allocated everybody a one-off discretionary spend to kit themselves out with maybe some extra things. Tech-wise, they were fine, but maybe they didn't have a desk or, a comfortable chair. So we just tried to do everything that we could to make sure people felt well looked after, cared for, thought about, and obviously also commercially so that people were in the best position possible to continue with that continuity of client service and looking after our clients.
Was there anything that surprised you when people were filling in those anonymous surveys, or you were doing these health checkups with the team? In terms of the comments made or the responses your team had, or people had the ideas people had. Was there anything that came out of it where you were surprised, or an innovation came out of it that you hadn't thought of, but actually has become a really valuable component of what you're doing going forwards?
I think in terms of a process is incredibly valuable because I mentioned I'm sat at home with my kids, and at the beginning of lockdown that was a shift pattern with my husband, looking after them, being available, being offline, having a child on my knee for a client call. That perspective is really, really different to actually the vast majority of my team who don't have children. So just having that process in place and understanding what was problematic for them during lockdown, it was just such a different lens if, the vast majority of our team are either living on their own in London or living in flat shares, and, just thinking about the fact that they didn't necessarily have a great space to work in because they were in that flat share environment, or they were working in their bedroom and that was giving them stress. And I think that was potentially difficult for me to understand without asking those questions because my perspective was so different. So I think there was a kind of a physical environment piece. And then I guess something that's pleasantly surprised me is how adaptable everybody's been. There's been a huge amount of resilience, and I'm really proud of kind of some of the things that the team have set up without having any kind of corporate top-down initiative. I'm not surprised. We're a very thoughtful team in that way anyway, but it's been great to see people take their own initiative. So, for example, one of our teams set up the Missive pub on a Friday where Zoom gets taken over at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and it becomes a virtual pub. And that's without fail held every week by one of our account directors, and she's really pushed that through, which has been fantastic. We use Slack a lot as well, so the team took it upon themselves to create Slack groups for the people that they sat with on their pod in the physical office to try and kind of maintain that informal conversation channel that you might find a bit more difficult in a remote environment. So some of those things have been a real pleasant surprise in terms of the team just taking it upon themselves to stay connected and stay in touch.
And in terms of the business side, I mean, it sounds like as a team, everyone managed to come together and really created things that enabled them to continue the culture and keep positive through the period. What about the commercial side and your clients? What did you notice or see in terms of demand? Did you see a drop off in business, particularly in those first couple of months? And what kind of businesses or services were people really after, during that lockdown period?
Yeah, so we had a challenging couple of weeks in the immediate lockdown period where we've got a couple of clients who are really directly affected by lockdown. One co-work space that we support, and a fintech company that is business models kind of predicated by international travel. So they paused our work with them overnight, and that happened really quickly. And I think that was quite alarming, obviously. Not a huge proportion of our portfolio, but I was really worried that was just the beginning of a process that we were going to have to endure over the next 3 to 6 months. So naturally, we went into kind of planning mode and put together various worst case scenario forecasts. We quickly cost cut. Some of it was simple around sort of travel budgets and client entertainment budgets and stuff like that. We worked really hard to quickly create a kind of scenario where we felt comfortable that we were going to be able to protect everybody's jobs. And then I think actually commercially, we've been really fortunate. We have a large proportion of our portfolio in B2B tech. So I think sort of B2B side of the industry has been quite resilient. Technology has been quite resilient. So that combination has been great for us. And so we haven't actually experienced the commercial pain that I was concerned about. We prepared for it. We're a sort of stronger business for it. I'm glad, because I think, we have to see what's to come. I know we're going to talk about the future in sort of later part of the podcast, but it would be absolutely bonkers not to prepare for some contraction, given that the whole of the global economy is facing recession. And it will be our first year where we don't grow. And so I guess for a kind of, budding, nimble, sort of somewhat young, even though 5 years old business, that's disappointing. We all have quite entrepreneurial flair at Missive. We enjoy new business and pitching, and our pipeline, I guess, went on pause overnight as well. So that was the kind of immediate term experience.
What was the impact on you, as the co-founder of Missive, and obviously you having to take the leading role in navigating the company and the team and the business through this period? The reality that your clients, some clients immediately pausing, not knowing what the next few months was going to hold, and what the reality was going to be. Did that take its toll on you? How did that affect you, and how did you personally, as the leader, deal with that?
Yeah, I was quite stressed. Who wasn't during that period? I think it was just such chaos, and it was that combination of personal, professional that was really challenging. One thing that really helped me, and this sounds bizarre to say this in this way, is the sort of period of time that Missive had experienced pre-lockdown. And so to give you a bit of context, I am a co-founder of Missive. There is another founder, Emma Ross, and in August last year, she got a severe cancer diagnosis out of the blue. So we'd run the business together and as co-founders over the previous 4 years, and I was left in August holding the baby, so to speak, whilst she went and had treatment, major surgery, and then chemotherapy. And thankfully, we're now enjoying her being out the other side of that, with her latest test results being really positive. So she's actually in the process of lockdown, just returning to the business. And with that perspective, and having experienced those previous 6 months, it really put things into sharp focus in terms of if we could set a commercial plan that meant we could protect everybody's jobs and make everybody feel secure and kind of just bunker down, then and keep clients happy, obviously, client service, and make sure that we were prioritising doing a fantastic job for those clients that we were working with. Everything else didn't really matter. If we could protect those two things, then we could easily ride out this year and move forward from that. So in many respects, having had such a challenging 2019, it enabled me to be a lot calmer about lockdown and coronavirus than I think I perhaps would have been without that perspective.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. We're just going to take a quick break now, but don't forget PR in Lockdown is available on your preferred podcast library. And of course, on YouTube as a video podcast, so you can see Nicola's and I's smiling faces back at you. Just search PR in Lockdown on YouTube. Coming up, we'll be chatting about tackling the transition from lockdown into this new reality and the long-term changes that we might see in the PR industry. Welcome back to PR in Lockdown. We're with Nicola Koronka from Missive, a co-founder of Missive. And Nicola, let's just talk about where we're at now, where Missive is now. We're transitioning from lockdown to this new reality of having to deal with COVID-19 and the implications that it's having on just the way we work. Just give us an overview of where you're at now in terms of a company and also a team.
Yeah, so it's been banded around so much, but I do feel like we're in the new normal. Everybody's very settled, and we have many members of our junior team who are working around the country at their parents and don't have any plans to come back to London anytime soon. They've even given up kind of London flat shares to save some money in terms of the kind of permanence that we're looking at here. So we're definitely not opening our office in Q3. So that takes us to the end of September, and we've got Q4 under review, and that's in direct consultation with the team in terms of survey and understanding their needs. We've got a few members of the team who I think are more keen than others to get back to that office environment, but we'll do that when we think it's safe.
That's interesting, isn't it, that you've found there are some members of your team that are really keen to actually get back to that conventional working, or at least a blend maybe at least of getting back to the office.
Look, I think we all miss an element of it for sure. You'd be hard pushed to find anybody, I think, that works in the PR industry that's not particularly social and enjoys that kind of collaborative, creative element of our job. And it's very challenging to do things like create a really good PR plan and create kind of campaign ideas and do that in a really collaborative way. I think we've had the upside of people feeling like they've actually got more time to be thoughtful about things and more space to dedicate more time to client ideas, to being accountable to measurement, to reminding ourselves of the 12-month plan and how on track we are. And I think people feel like they've got more space to do that. But conversely, the ability to bounce ideas is obviously harder, and we do our best. But in terms of it feeling kind of normal, over the last, I'd say, 4 to 6 weeks, things have really returned in terms of new business. So whilst we've been able to maintain that continuity of client service throughout the whole of lockdown, and indeed many of our clients are actually international anyway, so we have very few client contacts who are based in London, and therefore video meetings and calls and stuff are just second nature to them. So we've been able to uphold client service really well, and hopefully our clients would say the same. But the thing that we've noticed over the past month in particular is a uptick in new business. So I think a lot of brands recognise that whilst we're moving out of lockdown, moving out of such tough restrictions, things aren't going to change radically anytime soon. And so those organisations that perhaps in March told us they would needed to put that RFP process on pause are now bringing it back to the table, and we're pitching on Zoom and winning new clients again, which feels odd when we're not together, to be honest. And having not ever met some people in person feels strange for such a relationship-based industry. But I think it's really healthy for our industry to kind of stand up and be counted for the content and ideas and plans and proposals and our methodologies, rather than necessarily just the good rapport in the room, which I think is somewhat of a cliche of PR of old. So I think it's actually quite a healthy test to be able to pitch on Zoom and succeed. So we're doing a bit more of that. And I guess, reflecting on how work and some of the skill set and services that we provide might have changed a little bit. I think we're definitely seeing more emphasis around digital content, and that's across social media, predominantly LinkedIn for our B2B clients, and also their own channel content, and kind of getting things in order like websites and blog content, thought leadership and stuff like that, things that perhaps clients haven't prioritized fully in the past. I think they're now recognizing both the value of that content, but also the need for it in an environment where face-to-face opportunities to network and build their businesses are diminished.
That's really interesting. So in this uptick that you've seen, a lot of it is for, front of house based content. So, people wanting services around building a profile and having a good front of office, front window, so people can get to know them without having to obviously meet them face to face.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we do have a number, like sort of trade shows across our industry sectors around telecoms, financial services, various others are a large part of network building across the kind of European tech scene. And so to have those ripped out of agendas, the clients are coming to us and saying, well, not only have we got budget, but we've also got a business requirement to maintain that pipeline or continue to grow our brand presence in sort of, the investor community or whatever it might be. And so, they're turning to evaluate the quality of their own content, create that shop front, like you say. And we do a lot of work on LinkedIn, both for brands and for spokespeople, to enable them to use LinkedIn as a virtual networking channel.
How comfortable are you with the idea? I mean, you mentioned how people are not going to be going back to the office anytime soon, or at least not in big numbers to work together as a conventional team in the old school, we should say, pre-lockdown way of doing it. Are you comfortable as the leader, as the manager, with the idea of people working virtually permanently, full-time virtually, or at least doing a lot of their work and working a lot with your team virtually?
Yeah, there's been a huge debate about this, I think across PR, across the business sector at large. And I read a really good article in The Guardian last week that talked about, let's not get blinkered here about how easy it is to work from home. It is. And I'm really proud of the continuity of service we've delivered. I think it will be transformative in terms of flexible working policies and people having that trust in their staff. I'd say we were pretty progressive on that already. We won Best Places to Work award with PR Week last year. I judged this year. There's still a number of companies in that judging process where flexible working for them was offering a day a week at home. We've always gone further than that. And I think we'll see more people taking advantage of it than they did. I still very much see a place for a physical location where we meet and work together. For an organisation that prides itself on having a really strong culture, I think it would be increasingly challenging over time to uphold that culture virtually. Yeah. So we do our best, and I think everybody feels like we are maintaining it right now. I think as a long-term proposition, what we do is collaborative, and I think we get the best ideas out of each other and working together. And I think it would be remiss to think that we would be able to do without an office at all.
What are are there any headaches or things that you're grappling with at the moment in this period of transition? To do with the way that you're working, to do with the services you're providing. Is there anything that you're trying to work out and tease out now in terms of developing a new way of doing things?
I think the constant video interactions are exhausting. I think everybody's found them quite tiring to do. There's research on why that is in terms of like the psychological demands of picking up cues and picking up body language on 10 faces across your screen is far more tiring than being out in the room. So I think that is just a constant challenge in terms of keeping everybody engaged on video rather than in person. We found that the sort of benefit that I talked about around coming up with ideas and being thoughtful on planning and client strategy, I think there's been an uptick in that benefit for the individual. So having that clear space and headspace to focus on some of those things rather than the noise of the office around them, I think has been really positive. The downside, I think, is it's a less collaborative process.
Yeah.
So we've had feedback from the team that in some of the new business work that we've been doing, which, often is very fast paced and deadline driven, we've left team members behind sometimes where we haven't been able to kind of take them on the journey of developing that messaging and developing that strategy for a client. So we're working on that in terms of how we collaborate and whether there are additional tools outside of the ones we already use to make that process a bit stronger.
Yeah, and in terms of for you and looking at the business now and looking ahead, what are your real priorities? Let's say the next 6 months, what are you really focused on? And I suppose a second question to that is, how long are you seeing or expecting a degree of disruption to continue in your services and the business that you're providing? Are you looking at it as a kind of, this is an ongoing disruption which needs to be until there's some kind of vaccine or something? Or do you see it as you'll be able to overcome that disruption in a shorter term?
Yeah, so I guess in two parts. One, from a kind of physical environment, I think when we open the office and the extent to which we do will be dictated by the team and obviously what's going on in the UK at that time. And I'm less concerned about the impact on that in terms of our ability to do business. We've proven since March that we can do this and bring a lot of enthusiasm to the table doing it. So I don't see that as being a big challenge. I think the big challenge is just the unknown. There's loads of data out there about economic contraction, and I think we'd be foolish to think that it wasn't going to come to PR, and it hasn't already, obviously, and that it wasn't going to impact Missive. So I think we have to prepare not just for the fact that we've ridden out this initial storm, but that a recession could continue to put financial pressure on the business. So in that respect, we're cautious. We're keeping a tight hold on costs and protecting everybody's job at the same time. So they're the things that are most important to me going forward, just kind of keeping an eye on that. I'm sort of cautiously optimistic. I think one thing that I've been really pleasantly surprised about is I think that our industry as a whole goes into these periods and the recession hasn't really bitten yet, so let's see. But we've just gone through this pandemic and worrying about whether PR remains a sort of discretionary spend for businesses. And I really feel like the industry has turned a corner in the last 5 to 10 years where it's not. We haven't had our budgets cut by many clients at all, and we're still seen as a really vital service. And that's not just because they're using us to manage the crisis, it's because we're an integral part to helping them grow and develop their businesses. And in that respect, it gives me a lot of comfort that hopefully, at a minimum, we can keep doing what we're doing. I think the challenge will be in this remote environment, how do we grow and how do we improve and how do we innovate? And innovating Missive and innovating our services for clients is challenging remotely. So that's something I think we need to think about going forward. And not least now, we're out of a firefighting stage where we were planning month by month, and we're really looking ahead now for the first time to the rest of the year and what the next half of the year looks like. And it's a good time for us to now start thinking about what does that mean for innovation at Missive and think about some of those bigger picture things rather than just the day to day.
Yeah. Let's just talk about the PR and communications industry more widely. You've already chatted about the evolution that the industry's been through over the past 5-10 years. What do you think will be the most significant changes you expect to see, or you think could happen as a result of lockdown, as a result of COVID-19?
So I can see changes in PR around, that digital content piece that we talked about before. I think it will accelerate clients' appreciation for increasing that as part of their mix. I remember having a lot of anxiety at the very, very beginning of lockdown when the news broke about a lot of newspapers who were furloughing vast swathes of their team.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article in particular about City AM, and there was just such a string of workforce left. And I remember having a bit of a kind of crisis moment where I was thinking about the future of the media industry and the print media industry. And it's a topic that we've all talked about for years, the decline of print media, the decline of its importance and its literal decline. And I think we'll see an acceleration of that. It was a trend that was already happening, and a greater appreciation for PR and communications as a discipline that can impact all business segments rather than just driving media relations. So I think it maybe will just impact kind of an acceleration of some of the trends that we've already been seeing in the industry. And then from a kind of the technology perspective, obviously that's our other industry that we care about at Missive outside of our own kind of skills discipline. We're seeing, like wide scale mass adoption among our like health tech clients, for example. It's been absolutely fantastic for them. The NHS is really opening up to adopting technology to help deliver its services. And, even on a personal level, we've all experienced now a kind of virtual GP appointment that
absolutely
seemingly was really difficult to do before lockdown. I don't know why, but we're now getting a bit more progress where technology is recognised as providing kind of more efficiency in our daily lives. So I think that will accelerate too. So I think that's really beneficial for some of our startup clients, and we'll put more pressure on our large blue chip clients to really get their house in order and deal with that digital transformation.
How can people get in touch with you? So what's your Twitter handle, and also in touch with Missive as well and the team more generally?
So I guess more generally, we're probably most active on LinkedIn. So we're Missive Comms on Twitter and on LinkedIn. You'll find us. We publish a lot of content there and via our blog on our website, The Missive. And you can find all of our contact details on our website, missive.co.uk.
Nicola, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast, and thanks for listening to PR in Lockdown as well. This is an ongoing series, so if you like what you're hearing, subscribe to us on your preferred podcast library. Or, of course, on YouTube, you can see the video podcast if you just search PR in Lockdown in YouTube. And it's both on the PRCA YouTube channel and the Access Studios YouTube channel. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. PR in Lockdown is presented by Rob Double, and the guest this episode was Nicola Koronka, co-founder of Missive. It is created by Access Studios in collaboration with the PRCA.